Everett Vale was standing beside a fountain that cost more than Naomi Bell's apartment building when she turned the city water key and shut his whole celebration dry. The cameras were ready. The mayor was smiling. Champagne waited on a table under a white tent, and the richest developer in the county had one hand on a pair of golden scissors. Then an overlooked water department field technician in muddy boots stepped into the street, knelt by a curb box, and cut off the temporary line feeding Vale's new luxury tower. Security ran toward her. A foreman shouted that she had just ruined $1 million concrete pour. Everett saw only sabotage at first. But what if the woman everyone wanted removed was the only person who knew that the water being stolen uphill was making children sick downhill? And what would you call disobedience, if obedience meant letting a neighborhood drink the evidence? The fountain coughed first. It had been designed not to cough. It had been designed to rise in a smooth sheet of water from a black stone basin, fold over itself like glass, and catch the morning sun behind the words Vale Harbor Residences. Luxury apartments, rooftop pool, river views, walkable retail. A better city, built higher. Instead, the fountain sputtered once, gasped, and died. A thin, wet silence moved through the crowd. The string quartet stopped playing. A councilman lowered his phone. A woman from the Business Journal turned slowly toward the street. Under the white tent, donors and contractors shifted in place, their polished shoes sinking a little into the damp grass beside the brand-new sidewalk. Everett Vale looked from the dead fountain to the curb. Naomi Bell was still kneeling there. She wore a faded city water department jacket, the kind issued to field crews when budgets allowed it, and passed down when they did not. The reflective strip across her chest was scratched. Her jeans were soaked dark at both knees. A canvas tool bag sat open beside her, holding a flashlight, sample bottles, nitrile gloves, a pressure gauge, and an old brass water key worn smooth where hands had gripped it for years. A small blue cooler rested near her boot, its lid taped shut with white evidence labels she had written by hand. She did not look like someone who belonged in front of television cameras. That was exactly why everyone stared. A security guard reached her first. "Mom, you need to move." Naomi kept both hands on the brass key. Not until someone from health answers the phone. The foreman arrived behind him, red-faced, hard hat tilted backward. She shut the bypass. "Do you know what that costs?" Naomi looked up then. She did not raise her voice. Less than a funeral. The words did not land the way truth lands later, after people are ready. They landed badly. They landed like disrespect in a place built to honor money. Everett stepped off the platform. His suit was navy, his tie a pale gray, his shoes clean enough to reflect the dead fountain. He was 56 years old, tall, handsome in the careful way of men who had assistants managing the damage time did to them. He had built riverfront towers, medical office parks, shopping centers, and senior communities across 3 states. His picture hung in hospital hallways beside donor plaques. He knew governors by first name. He had learned to make impatience look like leadership. He had also passed Naomi Bell more than once. He had seen her in the lobby of the city utilities building with a clipboard under one arm. He had seen her crouched by a hydrant during a pressure test outside one of his developments. Once he had stepped around her on a rainy morning while she scraped mud away from a meter lid near the curb. She had said, "Watch your step," and he had heard only street noise. Now she was ruining his ribbon cutting. "What is your name?" Everett asked. "Naomi Bell, field technician, South Pressure District." His eyes flicked toward the dead fountain. "Did someone authorize you to interrupt this site?" "No." The foreman barked a laugh. "There it is." Naomi wiped rainwater and grit from the brass key with the cuff of her sleeve. "I authorized myself when the residual disappeared at Jefferson Gardens." Everett did not know what that meant. That angered him more than it should have. Powerful people disliked being reminded of technical worlds they had paid others to simplify. The mayor moved closer, keeping a smile ready in case the cameras swung back. Everett lowered his voice. "Miss Bell, this is a permitted temporary service connection. The city approved it." Naomi looked directly at him. "The city approved paper. Paper does not drink water." That was the first sentence Everett Vale would remember for the rest of his life. Not because he understood it then, because he did not. If this story is already making you think of someone whose work you never really see, subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because whole cities run on people nobody invites to the stage. 3 hours earlier, before the fountain died, before Everett Vale learned her name, Naomi Bell was in the kitchen of a 2-bedroom apartment over a tax preparation office in Millbrook, tying her daughter's sneaker with one hand and checking a pressure map on her phone with the other. The apartment smelled like toast, menthol rub, and the coffee she had forgotten on the counter. Her daughter June sat on a stool by the door with her backpack open, a library book sticking out sideways, and one sock higher than the other. She was 8 years old, sharp-eyed, and forever asking questions that cut through adult excuses like a clean blade. "Mom," June said, "are water pipes like veins?" Naomi tightened the laces. "Kind of. So if one gets blocked, the whole city gets a stomachache." Naomi smiled despite the tiredness behind her eyes. "Something like that." From the small bedroom down the hall came a cough, dry and stubborn. Naomi's father, Silas Bell, had been awake most of the night. He had once been a pipe fitter for the city, a man who could listen to a valve through a wrench handle and tell you if the seat was wearing unevenly. Now diabetes had taken part of his left foot, his kidneys had failed 3 years earlier, and dialysis shaped the family calendar more than birthdays did. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Church time at 11 in the morning. Transport window starting at 10. Packed snack, medication list, backup socks, insurance card, and the blue folder Naomi kept by the door because hospitals believed paper more than daughters. Naomi's mother had died when June was still small. Her older brother lived in Arizona and called on holidays with guilt in his voice and nothing useful in his hands. So Naomi became the quiet hinge of the household. She worked for the city water department, packed lunches, stretched paychecks, changed wound dressings, handled co-pays, waited on hold with insurance, sat in laundromats with June doing homework on a plastic table, and tried not to count how many things in her life depended on one paycheck arriving on time. On the refrigerator was a yellow envelope from the landlord. Not an eviction notice yet. A warning. A rent increase dressed in polite language and legal margins. The building had new owners. The neighborhood was improving. The tax office downstairs was becoming a coffee bar. Naomi had 60 days to sign a new lease she could barely afford or find somewhere else in a city where every open apartment asked for first month, last month, security deposit, application fee, and faith. Faith was expensive. Beside the envelope, under a magnet shaped like a cartoon rain cloud, was a small watercolor June had painted at the public library. A blue house under a green umbrella. In shaky letters beneath it, June had written, "Our house should not leak." Naomi touched the paper every morning. It was not about the roof, though the roof did leak over the hallway when storms came sideways. It was about everything a child believed a home should keep out. Rain, fear, hunger, bad news, men in work boots measuring for condos, grown-ups whispering after bedtime. Naomi picked up her father's old brass water key from the kitchen table. It was almost as tall as June, T-handled and scarred, with Bell scratched into the metal near the grip. Silas had given it to Naomi when she passed her field certification. Officially, the department issued newer keys, lighter aluminum tools with bright orange handles. Unofficially, old field techs trusted old keys. They knew the feel of a buried valve turning. They knew resistance, corrosion, grit, and lies. Silas said a water key taught patience. "Never force a valve you do not understand," he told her. "Feel it first, then decide." That was his line, the one that had followed Naomi through her whole life. He said it about pipes, then men, then bills, then fear. He had learned it from working underground, where the wrong turn could break a main and flood a street before breakfast. Naomi had learned it from watching him move through the world, slow enough to notice, brave enough to act. She slid the key into the canvas bag by the door. Her phone buzzed. A message from her supervisor, Delroy Finch, South Route inspection today. Clear routine tickets before noon. Vale per ceremony traffic downtown. Avoid riverfront if possible. Naomi stared at the words, avoid riverfront. That was impossible. The riverfront was where the map had started whispering. For 2 weeks, Naomi had been things that did not fit. Not dramatic things. Infrastructure rarely announced danger like a movie villain. It murmured, first, a low-pressure complaint from Jefferson Gardens, a low-income apartment complex built in the 70s near the old canal. Then another. Brown water in building C. Cloudy water from a clinic lobby sink 2 blocks away. A resident named Mrs. Alvarez called twice about a sour smell from her bathtub faucet, then apologized both times for bothering the city. A pediatric home health nurse left a message about a child's feeding pump tubing being rinsed in water that looked tea-colored. The automated complaint system sorted those calls into different categories: taste, odor, pressure, discoloration, customer education, routine. Naomi read them together because she knew neighborhoods better than categories. If you are still listening, subscribe to the channel, because the quiet people in this story are the same kind of people who keep real neighborhoods standing when systems start to bend. She also knew the new Vale Harbor site sat uphill, tied to a temporary high-volume construction connection on the same pressure zone. Officially, that connection was permitted. Officially, the contractor had backflow protection, flow limits, and a monitoring requirement. Officially, everything important was supposed to be logged by people who had not been given enough hours to log it. Officially was one of Naomi's least favorite words. Her practical competence was not glamorous. She could read a pressure zone the way some people read faces. She knew which streets sat at the end of a tired main. She knew which dead-end pipes collected sediment after a pressure drop. She knew where old service lines were likely to be galvanized steel hiding under newer records. She knew that a sudden draw from a construction site could pull velocity through pipes that had been resting for years, stirring up iron, lead scale, and whatever else time had stored in dark places. And she knew chlorine residual mattered. Without enough residual disinfectant at the far end of a system, water that looked clear could become unsafe. Without pressure, water could pull in what it should push away. A city did not need a flood or explosion to hurt people. It only needed a failure subtle enough to be filed under routine. "Mom," June said, still holding her untied backpack, "are you coming to my water cycle poster thing after school?" Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. The poster thing, Tuesday afternoon, public library community room. June and 3 other kids were presenting science posters after the after-school program. Naomi had written it on the fridge calendar in purple marker. "I am coming," Naomi said. "You promise?" Naomi looked at the rent envelope, the pressure map, her father's bedroom door, and the canvas bag with the brass key sticking out like a question. "I promise I will try everything to be there." June studied her. Children who grow up around pressure learn tone before vocabulary. That is not the same. "No," Naomi said softly. "It is not." Silas coughed again. "Naomi," she went to his doorway. Her father sat on the edge of the bed, one sock on, one in his hand. He was thinner than he used to be, but his shoulders still remembered a stronger life. Beside him on the nightstand was a small round tin that had once held peppermint candy. Now it held his old union pin, a few screws, and a copper washer from the first water main repair he ever took Naomi to see when she was a child. He called it his lucky washer, though he did not really believe in luck. "You taking the old key?" he asked. "Always. You worried?" Naomi leaned against the doorframe. "I am looking at a pressure pattern." Silas nodded slowly. "Patterns do not care if people are busy. That is what worries me." "Then feel it first," he said. Naomi answered automatically, because family lines become part of the body. "Then decide." He smiled, tired but present. Before she left, June ran back from the hallway and pressed something into Naomi's palm. A small paper raindrop cut from blue construction paper, with a string looped through the top. From her school project, probably. On it, in pencil, she had written, "Water remembers where it goes." "It is for your truck," June said. "So you remember mine." Naomi swallowed. She tied the paper raindrop to the zipper of her canvas bag. It bounced softly against the brass key as she stepped out into a gray morning that smelled like wet pavement and diesel. The Millbrook Water Department field office sat behind the municipal services yard, between the salt dome and the garage, where garbage trucks backed in before dawn with their engines growling like tired animals. The building was low, beige, and fluorescent lit. The break room had 2 vending machines, 1 reliable microwave, a bulletin board covered with safe notices, union flyers, birth announcements, overtime sheets, and a faded poster that said every drop counts. Someone had drawn a tired face on the cartoon water drop with a black marker. Naomi arrived at 6:40 in the morning, 20 minutes before roll call. She did that because the computer in the dispatch room was fastest before everyone logged in. She filled her travel mug with coffee from the pot that had been on since 5, then stood at the terminal scrolling through overnight complaints. Jefferson Gardens Building C, discolored water. Repeat. Harborview Child Development Center. Low pressure at kitchen sink. First report. Little Harbor Dialysis Annex. Pressure fluctuation during pre-opening flush. Staff advised to contact facility maintenance. Naomi froze at the last line. Little Harbor Dialysis Annex was not a hospital. It was a small outpatient facility in a converted medical office building near Jefferson Gardens. Mostly adult dialysis, some pediatric support care, and a water treatment system of its own, maintained by professionals who followed strict protocols before any patient treatment. Naomi knew that. Everyone near dialysis knew water mattered. Dialysis clinics did not simply trust tap water. They filtered, tested, monitored, documented. But municipal water was still the starting point. Bad pressure could disrupt treatment schedules. Discoloration could trigger safety holds. Patients could be delayed, sent elsewhere, or forced into exhausting travel they could not afford. Naomi's father once missed half a treatment because a clinic's water system failed pre-check. By midnight his ankles looked swollen, his breath came shallow, and Naomi sat beside his bed counting the minutes until the rescheduled chair time. She opened the pressure map. The Vale Harbor temporary service showed a draw spike at 3:12 in the morning. Then another at 4:06. The main along Garrison Street dipped, recovered, dipped again. At the far end near Jefferson Gardens and the dialysis annex, sensors showed a flicker below acceptable pressure for too long to be dismissed and too short to trigger the automatic emergency threshold. A gray zone. Naomi hated gray zones. They were where responsibility went to hide. Delroy Finch walked in behind her with a tablet under one arm and a paper cup of gas station coffee in the other. He was her supervisor, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a careful way of speaking. Delroy had started in the field, same as Naomi. He knew pipes. He also knew management. Since his promotion, he had become fluent in phrases like budget constraints, chain of command, and documented appropriately. "Bell," he said, "please tell me you are not already digging into harbor." Pressure dipped again. "We got automatic alerts, not emergency threshold, then routine, residual complaint at Jefferson Gardens, discoloration at 2 locations, dialysis reported fluctuation." Delroy took a slow sip of coffee. Naomi. She knew that tone. It was not anger, it was warning. "What?" "Vale Harbor ceremony is today. Temporary line is inspected and permitted. Engineering signed off. Backflow report is on file. Have we physically checked the restrictor after last night's draw? That is construction inspection. Construction inspection is short 2 people. Everybody is short 2 people." She pointed at the screen. "That does not make the water safer." Delroy looked toward the glass wall separating dispatch from the break room. Crews were arriving now, laughing, shaking rain from jackets, clipping badges, arguing about basketball and overtime. He lowered his voice. "The commissioner's office wants no surprises today. Mayor is going to be there. Vale is going to be there. Half the council is going to be there. You understand what I am saying? I understand what you are not saying. I am saying do your assigned route. I am assigned South Pressure District. You are assigned routine tickets. Routine means no heroics." Naomi felt the blue paper raindrop brush her wrist as she reached for her bag. Water remembers where it goes. This is not heroics. Delroy leaned closer. "No, it is politics, and politics has a mouth big enough to eat field techs whole." For a moment the room softened. Naomi saw him not as a supervisor blocking her, but as a man trying to keep a worker with rent trouble and a sick father from walking into a machine built to grind up inconvenient facts. Then the phone on the dispatch desk rang. The dispatcher, Carla, answered, listened, and turned toward them. "Naomi, you know Jefferson Gardens?" Naomi's hand tightened on the strap. Carla covered the receiver. "Resident says water is brown again in Building B. Says her grandson has a stomach bug, and she wants to know if it is the water." Delroy closed his eyes. Naomi held out her hand for the call. Delroy did not give permission. He did not stop her either. Mrs. Alvarez's voice came through thin and apologetic, as if reporting unsafe water were a social inconvenience. "I am sorry to call again, sweetheart. I ran the tub like they told me, but it got darker, not lighter. My daughter says maybe the pipes are just old. I know you all are busy because of the big building today. Naomi looked at the screen. Vale Harbor's draw line rose like a heartbeat. Mrs. Alvarez, do not drink from the tap until someone confirms. Use bottled water if you have it. If you do not, I am going to see what can be arranged. Are children in the apartment? My grandson, he is 5. He threw up twice. Naomi's chest tightened. Vomiting could be anything. A stomach virus, bad food, anxiety. It did not prove the water had hurt him. Professionals would have to decide that. Evidence mattered. But waiting mattered too. Feel it first, then decide. I am coming to take samples, Naomi said. Delroy's head snapped up. She looked at him while she said it. I am coming now. The first consequence arrived before Naomi even left the yard. Delroy followed her outside into the drizzle, past parked trucks and stacks of orange cones, past a crew loading valve boxes into a pickup. Naomi, stop. She opened the side compartment of her city truck and checked her kit. Sample bottles sterile and sealed, residual test kit, pressure gauge, chain of custody forms, gloves, meter wrench, flashlight, cooler, ice packs. Delroy stood beside the open door. You do not have authorization for emergency sampling. Then call it routine sampling. Routine sampling requires schedule. Then schedule it for now. He gave her a look full of old friendship and new limits. They had been trainees together 16 years ago. He had seen her pregnant with June, seen her mother's funeral leave early because a main broke on West Olin, seen her father retire, then decline. She had seen his divorce, promotion, the way Haslav got smaller every year he moved closer to management. This is not how the system works, he said. Naomi placed the bottles into the cooler one by one. The system is what I am checking. If you shut anything down at Vale Harbor without engineering approval, they will suspend you. Maybe terminate. They already think Field is too independent. Field is where the pipes are. Do not make a line out of everything. Naomi paused. That hurt because it was accurate. She did turn things into lines. Drinkable and undrinkable. Pressure and no pressure. Safe and unsafe. Right and wrong. Her father had taught her that underground systems punished people who pretended blurry things were simple, but he had also taught her that some lines were real. I am not going to shut it down unless I have to, she said. Delroy looked at the brass key in her bag. And who decides if you have to? Naomi closed the compartment. I do. He exhaled hard. That is the problem. She climbed into the truck. As she pulled out of the yard, her phone buzzed with a message from June's after-school coordinator reminding parents about the water cycle presentations. At 4:30, Naomi did not open it. She kept both hands on the wheel. The route south took her through neighborhoods the city described differently depending on who was asking. Historic when developers wanted tax credits. Distressed when grants were available. Up and coming when rents rose. Forgotten when pipes broke. Naomi drove past a closed beauty supply store, a church with a food pantry sign, a payday loan place, a laundromat where she had spent too many Saturday afternoons folding towels while June read graphic novels from the library. Rain beaded on the windshield. The paper raindrop on her bag swung with each turn. Jefferson Gardens appeared beyond a chain-link fence, 8 low brick buildings arranged around a courtyard with patchy grass and a playground missing one swing. The complex had once been public housing, then affordable housing, then workforce housing. Under a partnership nobody living there could explain without getting angry. The pipes were old, the people were not. Naomi parked near Building B. Mrs. Alvarez met her at the entrance wearing a pink cardigan, slippers, and a worried expression. Her grandson, Mateo, sat on the stairs behind her with a plastic bowl in his lap, pale but alert. A cartoon dinosaur blanket covered his knees. I told him not to drink, Mrs. Alvarez said, but yesterday he filled his cup when I was in the laundry room. Naomi crouched near Mateo, careful to keep her voice warm and not official. Hey, buddy, your grandma says your stomach is giving you trouble. Mateo nodded. Naomi did not ask leading questions. She was not a doctor. She was not going to turn a scared child into evidence for a story she had not proven. She only asked, "Did you drink water from the kitchen sink?" He pointed toward the hall. It tasted like pennies. Pennies. Naomi looked at Mrs. Alvarez. I am going to take samples. I need the tap left exactly as it is until I finish. Do you have bottled water? 2 jugs. Use only that for drinking and cooking for now. In the kitchen, Naomi put on gloves and followed protocol. First draw sample, flush sample, temperature, residual, turbidity, chain of custody label. She photographed the tap, the sample bottle, the time written in words because her father always said evidence needed context. The water came out with a faint brown tint at first, then cleared, then clouded again when pressure changed. Her residual test showed lower than expected. Not gone everywhere, but wrong enough to make her stomach drop. She moved to Building C, then the community room, then the laundry sink. At each stop, residents appeared in doorways. A man asked if the water could make his dog sick. A young mother asked if boiling fixed metal. Someone said the city had told them last year the pipes were fine. Someone else said the city said everything was fine until white people complained. Naomi did not defend the city. She wrote things down. At 10:15, her father called. She answered with one shoulder holding the phone while she sealed a bottle. "Daddy, the ride is not here," Silas said. Naomi checked the time. Transport window started at 10. They could still arrive. They also could not. Give them 15 minutes. They called and said I was not outside. Naomi closed her eyes. He was inside because she told him to stay inside. Because rain made the ramp slick. Because he could fall. Because transport companies loved marking patients as unavailable instead of admitting drivers never knocked. Did they leave? Seems so. Naomi leaned against the truck, rain dripping from her hood. Dialysis was at 11. If he missed, the clinic might fit him later or not. If she went home, she could drive him herself and lose the samples. If she stayed, her father might suffer because the same kind of outsourced indifference she was chasing in the water system was happening at her own front door. A harder choice arrived without ceremony. "Call the clinic," she said. "Tell them I am trying. You at work?" "Yes." "You on something important?" Naomi looked at Jefferson Gardens. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the doorway with Mateo leaning against her side. "Yes." Silas was quiet for a breath. Then, weaker than she liked, he said, "Then do not turn around for me unless you have to." "Daddy, you know what I taught you." Naomi gripped the phone until her knuckles ached. Feel it first, then decide. "I am calling Vera," she said. Vera was their neighbor downstairs, retired school secretary, firm as a courthouse bench. Naomi called her, explained fast, and swallowed her pride while asking if she could get Silas to the clinic. Vera said yes before Naomi finished the sentence. Naomi promised gas money she did not have. Then she put the phone away and drove toward Little Harbor Dialysis Annex with the sample cooler on the passenger seat. At the clinic, everything looked calm from outside. That was what frightened Naomi. The building sat behind a pharmacy and a dental office, low and tan, with a blue awning over the entrance. A staff member in scrubs held the door for an elderly man with a walker. Two patients sat in a transportation van with blankets over their laps. A sign on the front desk said water system pre-treatment checks in progress. Please be patient. Naomi introduced herself to the clinic administrator, who brought out the biomedical technician, a woman named Priya Nair with sharp eyes and a badge clipped high on her scrub top. Priya did not waste time on ego once Naomi explained the pressure dips. "We saw pressure fluctuation during morning flush," Priya said. "Our system held, conductivity within range. Chloramine checks were acceptable after repeat. We delayed opening chairs out of caution. Any patients affected, delayed, irritated, tired, not treated until safe. We follow our protocols." "I know," Naomi said quickly. "I am not questioning that." Priya studied her and seemed to hear the difference between accusation and fear. "What are you seeing?" Naomi showed her the map on the tablet, the handwritten complaint cluster, the residual results from Jefferson Gardens. Priya's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. "That construction site is pulling from this zone?" "Yes." "With a temporary connection?" "Yes." "Backflow prevention verified?" "On file." Priya gave a humorless little laugh. "On file is not in the pipe." Naomi almost smiled. She liked her immediately. Priya let her take exterior samples from a hose bib on the property. She also gave Naomi a printed note stating the clinic had experienced pressure fluctuation and delayed patient treatments pending safety checks. It was not dramatic. It was not a lawsuit. It was professional, plain, and harder to dismiss than panic. As Naomi loaded the samples into the cooler, a black SUV pulled up near the clinic entrance. A man stepped out in a camel-colored coat, phone at his ear, moving fast. He held the door for an older woman with silver hair and a cane. Naomi recognized him from city meetings and newspaper photos. Everett Vale. Not at the ceremony. Here, Naomi stepped behind her truck door, not hiding exactly, but pausing. The older woman looked like him around the eyes. His mother, maybe. He guided her carefully, one hand hovering near her elbow without touching unless she needed it. His voice softened in a way Naomi had never heard from him on television. "I know, Mom. They are delayed. They are being careful." The woman said something Naomi could not hear. Everett answered, "I am sure it is nothing." Naomi stared at him. His mother was a dialysis patient at Little Harbor. The twist settled into place with a weight so uncomfortable it felt almost personal. The pressure problem at the far end of the zone was not just hurting the people Everett Vale never saw. It was touching his own family, and he did not know the line between his tower and that clinic ran under the same streets he had used for speeches about revitalization. He had built the demand uphill. His mother was waiting downhill. Naomi wanted to walk over and tell him right then. But she had samples, not full results. She had a pattern, not final proof. She had enough to escalate, not enough to accuse. Her father's voice held her back. Never force a valve you do not understand. So she took a photograph of the clinic pressure gauge with Priya's permission, logged the time, and drove toward the Vale Harbor construction site. Subscribe if stories like this remind you that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is a worker taking one more sample before the official story hardens. The second consequence was money. On the way, Naomi's bank app buzzed. Automatic draft failed. Rent reserve account insufficient. She had forgotten the copay from Silas's last wound care appointment cleared that morning. Then June's school called. Naomi answered on speaker, expecting the after-school coordinator. Instead, it was the school nurse. June had slipped during recess in the rain. Nothing broken, but her pants were wet, and she was embarrassed because the spare clothes Naomi meant to pack had stayed folded on the couch. The nurse said June was fine, but could someone bring dry clothes? Naomi's eyes burned. There are days when life does not ask you to choose between good and bad. It asks you to choose which person you love gets disappointed first. She called Vera again. Vera said she would handle it. Naomi heard fatigue under her kindness. Everyone in Naomi's life had already been asked too many favors. The brass water key rattled in the back as she turned onto Garrison Street. Vale Harbor rose ahead, glass and concrete against the gray sky. Cranes leaned over it like praying mantises. Trucks lined the curb. Workers in orange vests moved between pallets, hoses, temporary fencing, and the tent where the ceremony was being prepared. A banner snapped in the wind. Future home of Vale Harbor residences. Riverfront living reimagined. Across the street, older row houses faced the development like witnesses. Naomi parked at the edge of the construction zone and looked for the temporary service connection. It should have been drawing through a regulated assembly with a visible backflow preventer and a flow restrictor. It should have been easy to inspect. But construction sites have a way of becoming mazes of convenience. Hoses moved. Barriers shifted. Mud covered what paper made neat. A site superintendent named Wade intercepted her before she reached the meter pit. "Can I help you? City water. I need to check the temporary service." He looked at her jacket, then at her truck. "We were inspected. I need to check it now. Today is not a good day. Water does not know your calendar." He did not like that. "You got a work order?" Naomi held up her tablet. "Pressure investigation." "That is not what I asked." She was used to men on sites testing whether her badge weighed enough. She let the silence sit. "I am accessing the city meter," she said. "You can call my supervisor if you need to." He did. While he stood 10 feet away complaining into his phone, Naomi opened the pit. Mud sucked at her boots. The meter register had condensation under the glass. The flow was higher than the permit should have allowed for that time of day. A bypass hose, half hidden behind plywood and sandbags, ran from a secondary connection toward a concrete pump setup. The backflow assembly on the permitted line was there. The extra draw was not passing where it should. Her pulse slowed. There it was. Not a monster, not a dramatic smoking gun. A hose, a shortcut, a decision someone probably made at 4 in the morning to keep a pour on schedule and avoid a delay fee. One little workaround in a city full of people who would never know why their taps coughed brown. She photographed the line. Then she attached her pressure gauge. The needle trembled. Too low when the pump surged. She called Delroy. He answered with no hello. "Please tell me you are not on Vale's site." "I am on Vale's site. Naomi. There is an unlogged bypass draw, secondary hose around the permitted assembly. Pressure drop on surge. I have photos, samples, and clinic documentation. A silence. Then Delroy's voice, quieter. Do not touch anything. If they start the next pour draw, the far end drops again. Do not touch anything. I am calling engineering. How long? I do not know. Health, I will notify. How long? Naomi, I said I do not know. She looked uphill toward the ceremony tent. Guests were arriving now. Black cars, umbrellas, clean shoes. Everett Vale's face was on a program being handed out by a young woman in a raincoat. Near the pump, workers waited for the next phase. Downhill, Jefferson Gardens residents were being told to flush brown water. At Little Harbor, patients were delayed in chairs, bodies holding fluid because a system designed around precision was being nudged by shortcuts. Her father was hopefully on his way to dialysis, because a neighbor saved the day the transportation contractor abandoned. June was wearing borrowed sweatpants in the nurse's office. Naomi had a rent warning on her fridge, failed draft in her phone, and a job she could lose by touching the wrong valve without permission. Temptation arrived quietly. She could wait. She could write the report. She could let the next surge happen and say she followed chain of command. She could protect her job, her rent, her daughter's stability, her father's insurance. She could tell herself the clinic had protocols, the residents had bottled water if they could afford it, and responsibility belonged to people with bigger offices. She could be reasonable. Instead, she looked at the brass water key. A route is not always a bus line. Sometimes it is a pipe. Sometimes it is a promise. Naomi did not have her father's exact words for that, but she had his hands in her memory, gripping a valve slowly, listening before turning. She knelt in the mud. Wade shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" Naomi placed the key over the curb stop. She felt resistance, old grit, new pressure, a city arguing through metal. Feel it first. She turned the key a quarter turn and watched the gauge. Then another. The bypass line shuddered. The pump groaned. Up by the tent, the fountain coughed, then died, and Naomi Bell, who had been told not to make a line out of everything, drew one in the mud. The misunderstanding unfolded faster than the truth. Wade grabbed for the water key, and Naomi stepped back with it in both hands. A security guard put himself between her and the tent. Two construction workers shouted at once. Someone yelled that the concrete mix was time-sensitive. Someone else said the mayor was on camera. A communications aide asked if this was a protest. A council staffer whispered union stunt. A donor asked whether water department workers were always allowed to carry those big metal things. Everett Vale approached with the controlled anger of a man used to problems becoming smaller when he walked toward them. "Mrs. Bell," he said, because he remembered her name now. "You will turn that service back on. No, you have disrupted a permitted construction site and a public event. I stopped an unlogged draw. You do not get to make that determination alone. I did not make it alone. The pressure made it, the residual made it, the complaints made it, the clinic delay made it." He stared at her. "What clinic?" Naomi saw the first crack. Little Harbor Dialysis Annex. Everett's expression changed before he could control it. Just a flicker, but she caught it because catching flickers was her work. "My mother is there," he said. "I know." The words sat between them like a valve box opened in the street. For 1 second, Everett looked less like a developer and more like a son who had left his mother under a blue awning, while he went to cut a ribbon. Then his defenses returned. "My mother's clinic has its own treatment system." "Yes. Then do not imply my project endangered her. I am implying your project pulled pressure from the same zone as that clinic in Jefferson Gardens through an unlogged bypass around the permitted assembly. Professionals can determine the health impact. I am telling you what is happening in the pipe." Wade stepped forward. "That hose is temporary. We used it because the approved line was choking the pump. We had a schedule." Everett turned slowly toward him. Wade seemed to realize too late that he had said the useful part out loud. Naomi reached into the cooler and pulled out the chain of custody form, sealed in a plastic sleeve. "I have samples from Jefferson Gardens, Little Harbor exterior, and the site. I have photos of the bypass and pressure readings during draw. I have repeat complaints from residents who were told to flush. I called health. I called my supervisor. Nobody moved fast enough." Everett looked at the cooler. Until that moment, it had been an object in her hand, a blue plastic inconvenience. Now he saw it as evidence. He also saw the paper raindrop tied to her bag, wet at the edges, penciled with a child's handwriting. Water remembers where it goes. Something about that made him angrier, because shame often enters powerful men through the smallest door. "You staged this," he said. Naomi blinked. "You brought cameras to create leverage." She looked around. Cameras were everywhere, but none belonged to her. Television crews for his ceremony, phones in the hands of his guests, reporters invited by his office. The public attention he had purchased had turned toward the part of the city he had not meant to show. "I did not invite them," she said. "You did." A few people heard that. A few looked down. Delroy arrived 10 minutes later in a city truck, followed by an engineering inspector and a health department environmental specialist named Dr. Marin Cole. Dr. Cole wore rain pants over office clothes and had the calm voice of someone who knew panic wasted time. She asked Naomi for the samples, chain of custody forms and readings. Naomi handed them over. No speech, no flourish, just evidence moving from one responsible hand to another. The inspector verified the bypass. Dr. Cole called for a precautionary advisory in the affected blocks pending testing, bottled water distribution at Jefferson Gardens, and pressure stabilization. The clinic continued holding treatments until their internal system checks cleared. The construction site was ordered to keep the temporary connection closed until inspected, corrected, and approved. Wade swore into his phone. The mayor stopped smiling. Everett Vale stood under light rain beside a dead fountain, watching people in ordinary jackets do the work his ceremony had interrupted. Naomi thought the worst part was over. She was wrong. At noon, she was ordered back to the field office. By 1:15, she was sitting in a small HR conference room with a paper cup of water, wet socks, and her father's brass key lying on the table as if it were contraband. On the wall was a framed mission statement about service, safety, and trust. Naomi had always hated that it hung crooked. She hated it more that day. Across from her sat Delroy, HR manager Janice Pike, Deputy Commissioner Roland Myers, and a union representative named Kim who had come in on her day off, wearing a sweatshirt and the expression of a woman already tired of nonsense. A city attorney joined by video from a muted office. Janice began in a careful voice. "Naomi, this is an investigatory meeting regarding unauthorized interference with a permitted service connection and possible violation of chain-of-command protocols." Kim leaned back. "And regarding a field technician identifying an unpermitted bypass that everyone else missed." Janice did not look at her. Deputy Commissioner Myers folded his hands. He was a polished man with polished worry. "No one is denying the bypass was improper. The issue is process." Naomi almost laughed. Process. Another word that could mean safety or delay depending on who owned the clock. "I called Delroy," she said. "I called health through dispatch. I documented. You were instructed not to touch the connection." The pressure dropped while the pump was preparing for another draw. Engineering had not verified risk. Engineering was not there. Myers's face tightened. That does not give field staff unilateral authority to disrupt critical infrastructure tied to a major development. Kim sat forward. "Critical infrastructure is the neighborhood water system, not a luxury fountain." Delroy looked down. Naomi watched him. She wanted him to speak. He did not. The city attorney said, "We need to determine whether Ms. Bell's action exposed the city to contractual damages." Naomi felt something inside her go very still. Not whether residents were exposed. Not whether a clinic was disrupted. Not whether the system had missed repeated warnings. Contractual damages. There it was, the invisible pipe beneath the meeting. Money had better pressure than people. Janice slid a form across the table. "Pending investigation, you are being placed on paid administrative leave." Naomi knew enough to hear the trap. Paid leave sounded gentle. It also removed her from the field, from the evidence, from the pressure zone, from the residents who now trusted her. Name more than the department's hotline. It made her quiet while people with offices rewrote the story. For how long? Until review is complete. When is that? We cannot say. Her rent warning flashed in her mind. Paid leave might keep a paycheck coming, but overtime vanished. Field differential vanished. If the investigation stretched, if discipline followed, if termination came later, the apartment, her father's care, June's school stability, everything could crack. Naomi looked at Delroy again. He finally spoke. "Naomi, go home. Let the process work." She heard the plea under it. Do not make this worse. But worse for whom? Her phone buzzed. Vera had sent a photo. Silas in a clinic chair, blanket over his legs, giving a thumbs up. The text said he made it. Tired but fussing, which means normal. Then another message from June's after-school coordinator. Hope you can still make it. June saved you a front-row chair. Naomi placed the phone face down. I will cooperate with the investigation, she said. But I want it recorded that the bypass was physically present, the pressure drop was measured, and the affected residents need follow-up sampling beyond today. Myers sighed. That is noted. No, Naomi said. That is typed. Kim smiled faintly. Janice typed. Then she drove to the public library and arrived 20 minutes after June's presentation ended. For a few minutes, Naomi let herself be only a mother who had arrived late and stayed. If this kind of slow truth matters to you, subscribe and stay close. The hardest part of doing right is often what happens after everyone agrees something was wrong. Meanwhile, across town, Everett Vale sat in the back of his SUV, looking at a photograph someone had texted him. It showed Naomi, kneeling in the mud by the curb box, brass key in hand, dead fountain behind her, his face turned toward her in anger. The caption already spreading online called her, the woman who shut down the billionaire's water. The phrasing irritated him, not because it was false, because it was almost true and still missed the point. His phone had not stopped. The mayor wanted coordinated messaging, his general counsel wanted silence. The contractor wanted indemnity. His public relations team wanted a statement praising swift action while avoiding admissions. His mother's clinic had called to say treatments were proceeding after checks, delayed but safe. His mother had called after that and asked, Everett, did your building have something to do with the water? He told her he was finding out. It had been years since he answered his mother without confidence. At Vale Development Headquarters, on the 22nd floor of a glass building overlooking the river, Everett entered a conference room where his team had assembled as if preparing for war. Counsel, public relations, construction operations, government affairs, the chief financial officer. Everyone had laptops open. Everyone looked serious. Serious people are useful when the question is strategy. They are dangerous when the question is conscience. His operations director, Blake, began. We need to establish that the unauthorized bypass was a subcontractor deviation from approved procedure. Counsel nodded. That is the cleanest position. Was it true? Everett asked. Blake blinked. The subcontractor did install the secondary hose. Who pressured them about the pour schedule? The room changed temperature. Blake looked at the CFO. Everett saw it. Answer. Blake cleared his throat. We had delay penalties tied to the podium slab. Weather already pushed us twice. There were calls about keeping today's visuals intact. From whom? No one answered quickly enough. Everett remembered a meeting 2 weeks earlier. He had been standing at his office window, looking down at the riverfront site through binoculars he pretended were decorative. He had told Blake, I do not care what it takes. That ceremony happens with water running and concrete poured. Blake had said there were utility constraints. Everett had said, solve them. Solve them. The most dangerous order in business because it sounds efficient and hides the question. How? The sentence hit him harder than shouting. A woman in line recognized him then. That is him, she said, not loudly, but sound travels differently when people are waiting for water. Heads turned. Everett had stood in hostile meetings before, zoning hearings, labor disputes, lawsuit mediations. But those rooms had microphones, agendas, legal counsel, security, structure. This was a courtyard at night, wet pavement shining under temporary lights, residents holding empty jugs, and he had no practiced language that fit. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward. My grandson drank that water. Everett opened his mouth. No words arrived. Naomi spoke, not to protect him, but to protect the truth. The health department is testing. We do not know what made him sick. We do know the water had discoloration and low residual, and we know the bypass affected pressure. Everett looked at her. She had every reason to make the worst claim possible. She did not. She stayed accurate, even when accuracy gave him room to breathe. That was when he began to understand her strength. It was not defiance. It was discipline. Dr. Cole from Health arrived with a clipboard and saw Everett. Her eyebrows lifted. Mr. Vale, I want to help, he said. Dr. Cole gave him the look professionals reserve for donors who arrive at scenes. Then start by not interfering. Naomi almost smiled. Everett nodded. Tell me what is needed. Dr. Cole listed practical things. Bottled water through the weekend, not a photo op pallet. Certified plumbing inspection of the complex. Flushing plan coordinated block by block. Independent lab testing. Door-to-door notices in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Transportation support for dialysis patients if treatment schedules shifted. Temporary pressure monitoring sensors at the far end of the zone. Full inspection of the construction connection before any further draw. Everett turned to his assistant, who had finally approached with a notebook. Do it, he said. Money can buy water cases. It cannot buy trust. I know. No, she said. You are beginning to. He accepted that because it was true. Then he noticed the notebook in her hand. It was not a city-issued form. It was small, black, rain-warped, with pages full of handwriting. Apartment numbers, complaint times, tap descriptions, names of residents who needed language support, people with medical equipment, people without cars. You are documenting all this while suspended? He asked. I am not suspended from being a neighbor. You live here? No. But I know what it is to have one shut-off notice. Turn your whole house into a math problem. He looked at the paper raindrop tied to her bag, now dried, wrinkled. What does that say? Naomi did not answer at first. Then she lifted it slightly. Water remembers where it goes. Everett looked toward his tower again. For the first time, he imagined water not as a feature, a view, an amenity, a line item, a pressure requirement, a permit condition, or a fountain under lights. He imagined it traveling, from main to meter, from tower to hose, from shortcut to pressure drop, from pressure drop to brown tap, from brown tap to a child's cup, from a child's cup to a grandmother's fear, from fear to a worker's notebook, from notebook to a dead fountain. Water remembers where it goes, and now, so did he. The offer came 2 days later, in a room that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. Naomi had been called back to the utilities building for a follow-up meeting. She expected discipline. She dressed for it. Clean city polo, black pants, hair pulled back, brass key left at home, because HR had already made it clear they preferred symbols without handles. But when she entered conference room B, Everett Vale was there. So were Delroy, Janice from HR, Deputy Commissioner Myers, Dr. Cole from Health, Kim from the union, and a city council aide Naomi had seen on television standing behind the mayor. The mood was strange. Not friendly. Not hostile. Tense in the way a room feels when everyone knows the old script no longer works. Myers began. Naomi, thank you for coming, Kim muttered. That is new. Myers ignored her. Preliminary review confirms an unauthorized bypass line at the Vale Harbor site. Pressure fluctuations in the affected zone, and deficiencies in cross-department response to customer complaints. Naomi noticed the language. Deficiencies. Passive. No subject. Harm without hands. Your samples assisted health in issuing a precautionary advisory, Myers continued. Lab results so far show elevated iron and turbidity in initial draws, low residual at certain points, and no confirmed pathogen contamination. Additional testing continues. Lead sampling is ongoing given disturbance concerns. Naomi exhaled slowly. Not safe enough. Not catastrophic. The kind of result that would let many officials say things could have been worse, as if that excused what had been. Dr. Cole added, the clinic's internal safeguards worked. Treatments were delayed, not unsafe. That matters. So does the fact that pressure instability should not have reached them. Naomi nodded. Precision mattered. Then Everett spoke. I owe you an apology. The room stilled. He did not say it like a press release. He said it like a man carrying something awkward, with both hands. I accused you of staging a disruption. I saw your action as sabotage because it cost me something before I understood what my decisions had cost others. I was wrong. Naomi looked at him. Yes, a few people shifted. Everett took it. I also want to make it right. There it was. The dangerous sentence. He reached his folder and slid an envelope across the table. Naomi did not touch it. What is that? A personal check. Enough to cover legal costs if the city disciplines you, and more. No conditions. Also, Vale Development will offer you a position in infrastructure compliance at a salary substantially higher than your city pay, should you want it. Janice looked startled. Delroy looked down. Kim watched Naomi carefully. For half a second, Naomi saw what the money could do. Rent, her father's medications, June's school clothes. Dental work she had postponed until pain became background noise. A safer apartment with no leak over the hallway. A car that did not sound like a drawer full of bolts whenever she turned left. The chance to stop asking Vera for rescue. Temptation did not always look greedy. Sometimes it looked like breathing room. Naomi looked at the envelope, then at Everett. "You think goodness is a debt you can settle." Everett flinched. "I did not mean that, I believe you, but the shape is the same." He pulled the envelope back slightly. "What would you accept?" Naomi sat with the question. Refusing help out of pride could become its own foolishness. Her father needed care. June needed stability. She needed work that did not punish attention, but she would not turn the neighborhood's water into her personal payday. She would not let the story become billionaire saves technician after technician saved evidence. "I will not take a personal check," she said. Everett nodded slowly. "And I will not take a job that makes me your proof of redemption." That landed. Kim's mouth twitched like she wanted to clap but chose professionalism. Naomi continued. "If you want to spend money, fund the repair without naming it after yourself. Bottled water until health clears every affected building. Independent testing residents can see. Replacement of the worst service lines at Jefferson Gardens. Pressure sensors at the far end of the zone. A public dashboard that shows temporary construction, draws in plain language. Paid community water stewards from the neighborhood, trained to report changes. And reimburse the city for overtime so field crews can inspect instead of triage." Myers sat up. "That is not simple." Naomi turned to him. "Neither is explaining brown water to a 5-year-old. Kim smiled faintly. Janice typed. Everett leaned back. His people would hate parts of it. The city would resist the dashboard. Contractors would fight transparency. Property management would argue about who owned which service lines. Insurance would hover. Council would warn against precedent. Donors would prefer a scholarship fund with a clean photo. Good, Naomi thought. Repair should make comfortable people sweat. Everett asked. "And for you, I want my record clear." Myers said. "That is under review." Kim cut in. "Her record will be clear." Naomi kept her eyes on Everett. "I want the department to create emergency authority for trained field staff when pressure failure creates immediate public health risk. Not permission to freelance. Clear criteria. Documentation. Health notification. Supervisor review after action. If you trust field staff to find failures, you have to stop punishing them for touching the valve before the press conference." Delroy looked up then. Something like pride crossed his face, mixed with regret. "And," Naomi said, her voice quieter, "I want overtime approved for South Pressure District until the complaint backlog is cleared. Not for me, for the crews." Everett nodded. "I can support that publicly." Myers stiffened. "Publicly?" Everett turned toward him. Yes, there it was, the beginning of conflict. Not a speech. A fight over budgets, authority, liability, embarrassment, and who got to control the story. Over the next month, the repair did not move like a miracle. It moved like a stuck valve, slowly, with resistance, with noise. The next morning, Everett Vale came to Jefferson Gardens again, this time for a meeting in the community room with residents, health officials, city staff, property management, and the construction contractor. There were no cameras at first because Mrs. Alvarez said cameras could wait outside until the people who lived there got answers. Everett agreed. The reporter objected. Mrs. Alvarez said, "Then drink our tap water and sit down." The reporter waited outside. It was not a polite meeting. A father asked why luxury apartments had enough pressure for a rooftop pool while his building got brown water. A dialysis patient asked why transportation plans were always afterthoughts. A tenant organizer asked who profited from deferred maintenance. Property management claimed the service lines were complicated. The city said ownership varied by segment. Dr. Cole explained sampling results without overstating. Priya explained clinic safeguards. Delroy admitted the complaint clustering should have escalated sooner. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Everett stood when residents asked him to stand. He did not give a redemption speech. Naomi had warned him against speeches. Instead, he read from his own internal timeline. At 7:42 the previous Thursday, my operations team received a notice that approved flow limits could affect the pour schedule. At 8:19 I was informed there might be utility constraints. At 8:21 I wrote, "Solve it." I did not ask what solving it required. That failure is mine. The room went quiet in a hard way. Counsel, standing near the wall, looked like he might dissolve. Everett continued. The bypass was installed by a subcontractor, but it existed inside pressure I created. I wanted the ceremony protected. The system protected the ceremony. Naomi watched residents hear it. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the sound of a powerful person naming his part without making himself the main character. Then the fight began. Property management resisted service line replacement, arguing that full replacement exceeded emergency scope. Residents booed. The city engineer said partial replacement could increase risk if not handled correctly and needed a coordinated plan. Vale offered funding, but the city could not accept it directly without council approval. Naomi raised her hand, not to make a speech, to propose sequence. First, keep bottled water distribution until health clears taps by building, not by press release. Second, install temporary pressure monitors at Garrison, Jefferson, and Clinic branch this week using emergency procurement. Third, schedule certified plumbing inspections by building with resident notice. Fourth, create a service line inventory. Residents can understand. City side, property side, unknown. Fifth, prioritize full replacement where disturbance risk and vulnerable residents overlap. Sixth, no construction draw above permitted limits until remote monitoring is live and visible to the city and health. Myers frowned. Emergency procurement for sensors still requires justification. Dr. Cole said. Public health justification exists. The city engineer said, we can deploy 2 loaner units now if we pull them from the North District. Naomi shook her head. Do not steal safety from one neighborhood for another. The engineer looked annoyed, then thoughtful. We have older units in storage. Not ideal. Do they read? Yes. Then use them until new ones arrive. A resident asked who watches the readings at night. Delroy answered before management could. We set a rotating on-call field review until the dashboard is live. Myers looked at him sharply. Delroy did not look away. Everett said, Vale will reimburse overtime tied to monitoring and emergency response through an escrow administered by the city, not through my company. Council whispered, Everett. Everett ignored him. A property manager said, this is becoming excessive. Mrs. Alvarez stood. She was small, but the room made space. My grandson is 5. He asked me if water can lie. Her voice shook, then steadied. That is excessive. The property manager sat down. That day did not fix everything, but it created a repair map with names, deadlines, funding lines, and people assigned to work instead of words. The local reporter published it. Residents photographed it. Naomi copied it into her notebook because memory was not respected until it became evidence. And if you have ever watched a simple fix become complicated because the wrong people might be embarrassed, subscribe. The repair is where the real story proves itself. Months passed. Spring softened the city. Grass pushed through cracked lots. The riverfront tower opened late, quieter than planned. The fountain ran again, but Everett insisted on a small plaque near the service room entrance, not in the lobby. It did not name him. It did not name Naomi. It named the pressure zone and the neighborhoods connected to it, with a sentence chosen by residents. Water systems are shared promises. Naomi thought it was a little polished but acceptable. Jefferson Gardens did not become paradise. The hallway lights still flickered. The playground still needed a swing. Rent still rose too fast. Some residents moved before repairs reached their buildings. A few service lines turned out to be less dangerous than feared. Others were worse. The work was messy, disruptive, and slower than anyone deserved. But taps ran clear after flushing plans. Pressure monitors caught 2 later drops before complaints piled up. Resident stewards were paid to report problems early. The dashboard became something local reporters checked during storms. Mrs. Alvarez's grandson, Mateo, recovered from whatever stomach illness had hit him. No one ever proved the water caused it. Naomi was careful about that. Truth did not need exaggeration to matter. Silas had hard days, then harder weeks. Dialysis continued its rhythm. Vera still helped. Naomi still owed her gas money sometimes. June grew taller, lost a tooth, and began correcting adults who used the word flush too casually. On the first warm Saturday in May, the public library hosted a community water day. It was not fancy. Folding tables, posters, a demonstration filter, kids making paper raindrops, a city engineer explaining pressure with clear tubing, Priya talking about medical water safety, Dr. Cole answering health questions. and resident stewards signing people up for home sampling appointments. Naomi arrived late because a valve inspection ran long. Some things did not change. When she entered the library community room, June was at the front, standing beside a new poster. This one showed a city map drawn in blue marker, with pipes like veins and small houses connected along the lines. At the center, beneath a green umbrella, was the same blue house from the old watercolor. The laminated original had been taped to the corner, curling slightly from age. Naomi stopped in the doorway. June saw her and grinned. Everett was there too, standing in the back beside his mother, who leaned on a cane and listened to Priya with fierce attention. He gave Naomi a small nod. Not ownership, not rescue, recognition. On a table near the children's art supplies sat a bowl of paper raindrops. Kids had written messages on them. Clean water is for everybody. Tell someone when it smells funny. Do not waste it. My grandma says brown is not normal. June walked over carrying one blue raindrop on a string. I made you another one, she said. Naomi took it. The paper was thicker this time, laminated around the edges. In careful pencil, June had written the old sentence again. Water remembers where it goes. Below it, in smaller letters, she had added, so should we. Naomi's throat tightened. She tied the new raindrop to her canvas bag beside the old one. The old paper was faded, wrinkled, softened by rain and months of field work. The new one shone slightly under the library lights. Beside them, the brass water key rested against the table leg, and in Naomi's pocket, the copper washer warmed under her hand. 3 symbols, all ordinary. A key that had shut down a rich man's fountain to protect a poor neighborhood's taps. A washer that remembered what holds when pressure rises. A paper raindrop from a child who understood, better than many adults, that water connects what people pretend is separate. The program began. June stepped to the front and explained her poster. She said pipes were like promises. She said pressure mattered because water had to keep moving the right way. She said grown-ups sometimes needed reminders to listen to people who checked things by hand. People laughed softly. Naomi did not laugh. She looked around the room instead. At residents, workers, doctors, engineers, children, an old woman with a cane, a developer in a plain jacket, a supervisor who had learned to speak sooner, and a city that still had too much old pipe underground and too many old habits above it. Nothing was fully fixed. That was the honest ending. But something had changed direction. And maybe that is where this story should leave us. Not with a billionaire redeemed. Not with a worker rescued. Not with a city magically healed because one woman made one hard choice in the rain. Leave it with a brass key in a canvas bag. Leave it with a paper raindrop swinging beside a field notebook. Leave it with an old copper washer in a child's palm, warm from being held. Leave it with the knowledge that every clean glass of water, every safe hallway, every working bus route, every stocked shelf, every quiet clinic, every place that holds when pressure rises, depends on people. We too often pass without seeing. And the next time something ordinary works, a faucet, a light, a door, a meal, a ride home, maybe ask yourself, who felt the trouble first, and what did it cost them to decide?